my guy, Scotty McKnight. What's going on, Scotty?
How we doing? Thanks for having me on. That was a fun one to wake up to on Monday. I had like 10 different texts, and they're like, showing me the screenshot of it. I'm like, I like that I didn't know that I held this record, because it made it way easier to realize, now I'm fifth place in that category.
Of course, Scotty went for like 106 yards against CSU. That was the previous record. And then Dylan, Zay, Jimmy, and Travis all eclipsed that the other day. But if you don't know who Scotty McKnight is, that is not the best record next to his name. He left the school all-time leader in receptions, all-time leader in receiving touchdowns, and also just the 6th player in NCAA history to have a catch in every single game of his career without missing a single game to injury.
That's an amazing
49
stat.
straight games with a catch through his career.
It was quite the ride. I'll say that. I mean, I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm so excited about this team. Obviously, anyone that's come through Colorado, there's a certain amount of emotional connection to the city of Boulder, to the fan base, to the program, and you want to see them succeed. So to see it on a national stage with someone like Coach Sanders and just what they were able to do as a team, that mindset, how disciplined they were, couldn't be more excited as a Buff fan,
Scotty, we've got Nebraska coming up this week. A lot of talk about hate week. Coach Prime said it's personal, and I want to ask you, how is this rivalry personal to you?
It's pretty interesting because I've seen some of the stuff that Coach has put out, and much like probably a lot of guys on the team, like you don't understand how personal it is until you're kind of in the mix. And for me, it took some of the past, CU Buff legends to kind of educate me, being from California, on what the rivalry, what it really meant. Taking me through like the Big Eight, and it was Coach Hagan and Alfred Williams and Matt Russell, and those guys would come back and talk to the team, and you started to realize just how deep rooted and historical this rivalry was. My first personal test was in 2007, and being from Southern California, it was my first time playing in the snow. So I'm like, how thick can we get these sleeves? Like, can we get them? But it ended up being like a shootout. I think we won like 65-51.
Yep.
Thanksgiving, Boulder was like just electric. So I saw that side of it from seeing the success in the rivalry and how that felt. And then the following, and this was like a pretty loaded Nebraska team. They had Ndamukong Suh, especially loaded on the defensive side of the football. They had Prince Amakamura, who we had a ton of battles with, me and him, who I loved to death. But there was also respect amongst the players and like respecting the rivalry. So the following year in 2008, we traveled up to Lincoln, and this is no slight on Lincoln, but it's not where I'd choose to spend my Thanksgiving if I could. And
That is a slight on Lincoln, and we like that.
Yeah. I think we lost on like a 59-yard field goal with, and it made us not bowl eligible that year. And that stadium was really, really electric. When you walk out of the tunnel, their fans are like right on top of you. I remember one of our guys, I think it was Cody Crawford or something, like he got grabbed and pulled from one of the fans. Like it was the fan involvement, and you'll see it too. Like they'll show up in Boulder this weekend. Like Nebraska fans get very heated. Obviously, as a Colorado guy, like I think we have the best fans in the country. So I think that adds an element to it. It's the history behind it, kind of those back and forth moments, and then just like the fans that are going to be hyped up to see the game. So I'm super excited to see this era, this team, kind of put their stamp on the rivalry game.
You mentioned it a little bit, but I call that game from your freshman year the other score. Because obviously 62-36 is the one that stands out to everyone. But like in my lifetime, the other most iconic game is 65-51. And I was looking back on it, and like that was one of the craziest football games I've ever seen. I think you guys were down 35-24 at the half, and then scored 35 straight points after that. And it was like a blowout. They scored a garbage time touchdown to even make it 65-51, but 35 straight. Jimmy Smith had a pick six. You had a touchdown in that game. You and Cody were both freshmen. That was a crazy football game.
It really was, and we knew they were, like I said, especially on defense that year. We just knew they had a lot of really, really talented players. And hats off to, I believe it was Mark Helfrich was our offensive coordinator at the time, but he implemented like an entirely new element to our offense prior to that game. So we had like a fly sweep receiver that basically created a different option that their defense had to look at. That's implemented in a lot of offenses now, but it was pretty unique at the time. So it was pretty much like we shifted our game plan to spread them out a lot more. And it opened up things for Hugh, who went off today. A lot of the receivers got involved. Like Patrick Williams had some big catches. Dusty Sprague had a huge catch on, I believe, was it a trick play?
Yes, something like that. I remember what you're talking about. He also he scored on a reverse.
Yeah. I saw Dusty this spring at the spring game. So I think like the way that we were able to kind of offensively execute against such a strong defense, and then Jimmy is like, Jimmy was one of my favorite people, and to this day still is. He's hilarious, and from the time he stepped foot on campus, he was like, I'm going to be a first-round pick. Like, no question. Even when he wasn't really a starter his freshman year, I'm going to be a first-round pick. And then by that game, for him to make a play that was so substantial, return it for a touchdown, then I think it was Lionel Harris had a pick the next drive. It was like, okay, we're firing all on the same right cylinder at this point. In the biggest game on Thanksgiving on national TV against our rival. So that's like why you play the sport, with your brothers.
And that one was both teams came in 5-7, so only one was going to be bowl eligible. Like you said, Jimmy had the pick six. Very next offensive play, interception. Hugh scores a couple plays later. Very next offensive possession, 3-and-out, blocked punt. Hugh scores it was just like the wave was insane. That was a good one.
Yeah, I was a fan of that one. That was a celebrate in Boulder kind of night.
Scotty, there's a lot of new players, a lot of new coaches on this team. If you could speak to them, what is something you'd like them to know about this rivalry before they play the game?
I would just kind of piggyback on what Coach is saying, and really, like, I can't say how much I respect Coach Sanders and really the mindset that he's instilling in this players, and it's palpable, and you can see it in how they play the game. And it's his entire staff as well. I thought Sean Lewis did a phenomenal job. The fact that they have so many new guys on this team and a new coaching staff, and they were able to be that disciplined and that efficient across the board, it speaks volumes to the way that they're being coached and mentored. And you can tell Coach really does care about the players. Like, he's a player's coach across the board. And he gets guys to believe. So in a situation like this, where it's a rivalry game, all of these guys have experienced rivalry games in the past, right? And there's always an introduction to them in some capacity. I think the portal makes it interesting, like the current landscape, because there is a lot of moving around. So you're not at the same school as much as you would be in the past. But you've experienced them growing up with the team down the street. You've experienced them in high school. So this one's just heightened because of the history. So I think, I don't have any advice for the team beyond keep doing what you're doing. And it's really about, I'd say, the people outside of it that have been there before you, that it means a lot to us. This game means a lot to us because we have lived through those moments that you're about to experience. And it does feel good when you get a W against it does feel good.
One of the people that I was actually hoping to have on this week, he's not in town right now, but he's still involved with the program, and you had a lot of experience with him, is Brian Cabral. And you were part of the team when he was the interim head coach. And I don't think I've ever seen any coach lean into this rivalry and the hate of Nebraska as much as he did during that week. curious just like what he was saying to you guys that week and just how he like kind of influenced you in terms of hating Nebraska.
Yeah, it's Coach Cabral. You know, between he and Coach Hagan, I think on the staff that I was a part of, they really did always kind of educate on the history. And when Coach Cabral took over and was our interim head coach at that time, he gave it to us, and he had former players come in, and it was constant throughout that week of just, you know, having us really understand kind of the disrespect that's existed throughout the years. And because he'd been with the program for so long, like he could speak to personal examples. So I think one of the things that makes college football so special is you come in with a pretty young, dynamic group of people, and you work tirelessly together, and in pretty extreme situations. You know, whether it's waking up at 4:45 to go do your, you know, mat workouts at 5 a.m., like it's pretty much collective suffering, and you're playing banged up. So that brings you really close. So when you have that strong kind of unit and you feel like someone else is disrespecting that unit, then it's time to go. So I think that's what Coach Cabral did, is like, you guys are a family. These people, you know, they're coming, they're not knocking on your door. Like, they're trying to kick your door down. So what are you going to do? And that causes a fight mentality of like, all right, let's roll.
Scotty, I mean, you watched Colorado last weekend. How do you see this matchup kind of working out on Saturday? Obviously, 2 new coaches, a lot of new players. What do you think this game ends up being?
Yeah, I think obviously Coach Rule's had a ton of success, you know, in different. Obviously, Baylor had a lot of success there. Carolina, like, look, that's a tough position to go to. I think he's a tremendous coach. He's got a great staff. He got some great players in there as well. For me personally, like, I have a hard time, and I'm incredibly biased. But from a head coach standpoint, with Coach and what he's doing, like, I'm bought in to him. So I know he's going to have these guys ready, and it's really just like, as stupid as this sounds, it's taking each play one at a time and being as efficient as they were against TCU. Like, if you're not hurting yourself, if you're disciplined, if you don't have penalties, if you're taking advantage of mismatches, like I saw multiple times against TCU where they outnumbered TCU in terms of scheme, and they'd get, you know, Dylan in the flat or whatever it would be when he scored. Like, they just did a good job of moving people around, and that takes discipline to understand shifts, motions, creating those mismatches. And it's more difficult too in a hostile environment, right? Now, I do think Colorado, when I've been there, the fans understand like when to chill when you're on offense, or when to be, like, you know, loud on defense. But in that back pocket of the, you know, Dow Ward end zone, that's the away section. That's where Nebraska's kind of like strong footprint is going to be. So it's, okay, how do we really stay focused on what we're trying to accomplish each play from an execution standpoint and take advantage of mismatches? And, you know, I think Shador, he shut a lot of people up.
Yeah, he did.
And I love that. Because he was so good, and you could tell him, like, going through his progressions, going through his reads, command of the offense, making every throw. You know, he really drives that ship, and it's cool to see him and his dad driving that ship. So I think, you know, his play is going to be critical. But if it's anything like last week and what we've seen, like, there's no stage too big for him. I think that runs in the bloodline. And then there's an outlier named Travis Hunter. Like, he is more than advertised, I'd say. His ability to take that volume of snaps and be, you know, a critical game breaker on each side of the football, shutting people down, locking people down, allowing them to give certain looks on defense. It's like when we were in New York, like we had Revis and Cromartie. Mm-hmm. We were able to do a lot of things defensively because we could put those guys on islands. So I think having a lockdown corner like him, and then having him turn around and be a mismatch as an offensive weapon as well is like a cheat code. So taking advantage of that and spreading the ball out, like they did a really good job of creating mismatches and getting the ball to different guys, as obviously indicated by 4 guys breaking my debut record.
I have to laugh, Scotty, because I was talking to Curtis Snyder yesterday about you, and he said he's the only non-quarterback that I've ever made do media like he was a quarterback. And your best friend's a quarterback, and you've done media, and you're giving us like very quarterback. You're giving us very quarterback answers. You're like, no disrespect to Nebraska, all due respect to Coach Rule. You're a quarterback in a wide receiver's body.
Yeah, I mean, I think off the field, I've always kind of operated in that capacity. On the field, I was a completely different person. And I was able to make that separation, which I think any of my past teammates would speak to. Like once I stepped on the field, like it was business, and I was ready to fight for, from the time the bell started till the game ended. Like I was fighting every single play, and it was about respect. And it's probably because I felt slighted and I played with a chip on my shoulder because I was undersized and like people doubted me. So I was always out to prove like, okay, like keep doubting me. Yep. And I'll see you in the end zone. And I showed Nebraska that quite a few times in the end zone.
Let's go. Last one from me. Do you have a favorite wide receiver on this team? I know it's early, but just in terms of the guys you were watching, was there anyone that you were like, man, I love the way that guy plays?
Well, a lot of times when I was playing, I looked at guys with certain skills that I didn't have, and I was envious of them. So I'm like, man, you run so easily. It's really hard for me to run fast. But you like naturally you're fast. So guys like Travis, like I look at Travis and I'm like, that guy's the total package in terms of his athleticism and really being a polished receiver. Like he's not just an athlete out there. He's very nuanced. I think the guy who stood out the most from a receiver standpoint is Joey. Like Jimmy.
Yep.
Jimmy. He seemed just like, he's so fluid and and fast, and he possesses all those skills. So I think they're really dynamic in that they have a bunch of playmakers on that side of the football that are versatile. Like they're not limited where I probably lived in certain areas of like, okay, go find a spot, get open, catch the ball, try and get like as many yards as possible and don't die. These guys are like, catch the rock, make you miss, take it 80 to the crib. Yep. That's really exciting to watch. So it's exciting to watch the group, but I'd say, I like watching all of them. I'd say Shador is the funnest one for me to watch, to be honest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's different, man.
Yeah. And I remember seeing his stuff when he was in high school and being a fan of him, like thinking he was one of the better recruits in the country. And then you don't quite know, right? Like that transition from high school to college. And I watched some of the stuff when he was at Jackson State. And when I saw him live at the spring game, that's when I was like, this dude is the real deal. And I get that like it wasn't live and they weren't hitting and all that stuff, but some of the throws he was making and how he's dictating the defense with his eyes and coming off, like it was NFL level, going through his progressions and then delivering, top throws, 50 yards downfield with the correct arc, like all of those things. I was like, this, you can't make that up. Like that's real. So he's probably the guy that I'm most excited to watch. So from a receiver, you asked me a receiver question, but I'm answering about a quarterback.
Scotty, you described, how you were a different guy kind of off the field and then when game day came. And we talk a lot about dogs on this show and dogs on this team. So I want to ask you, what does it mean to be a dog while wearing that black and gold?
Yeah. I think it's an attitude that you carry, that it is personal for you. Each play is personal, whether that's finishing a block. Like you're not just out there trying to, make plays or whatever. Like you actually want the other team to feel it. And for me, my fiance hates that I say this, but like for me, when I would go into any type of game or competition, like I didn't want to just win. I wanted the other person, I wanted to take their soul out of them. I wanted them to like want to quit the game and potentially never want to play football again. Like that's how I approached competition. And I think if you have people that have that mindset that are like, nah, I don't just want to win. Like I want to take your love and joy away for the sport because I'm here like all day. Like that's kind of what I would think is a dog.
That's a beautiful way to wrap up.
Man.
I love that. That fires me up, man. Scotty, appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Scotty.
Go Buffs.
Go Buffs.
Go Buffs, baby.